At 9 p.m, Jerry checked on Madeleine and the twins.
I actually stuck my head round the door and I just lingered for a few seconds and thought how beautiful she was. And that's the last time I saw her.
This is very concerning. This is a statement that bothers me a great deal. First of all, he begins with the pronoun I, which means psychologically he's putting himself there. This is good. We want him to be there. We want to have reliable information. But the next word is actually. The word actually means he's comparing what he's claiming to do with something else. Why would that be necessary at this point? Then I'd actually stuck my head around the door and I just lingered for a few seconds and thought how beautiful she was, and that was the last time I saw her. At this point, his child is missing, not dead, according to their narrative. Even though he's referencing a specific night, is Madeleine no longer beautiful? And what I ask the viewers is to consider that when you give a detail of a past tense event, the details should be in the past tense appropriately. When you speak about character or ongoing characteristics of a missing child, it should be present tense. And I thought, how beautiful she is. And that's the last time I saw her. That would be more acceptable. This is a past tense reference to Madeleine herself, not specifically bound up to a detail, but actually, was she only beautiful that night? That's what I mean by an attribute. So when someone uses an attribute of a missing child in the past tense, it's not a good signal. It's not a good signal at all. Now, he also stuttered with the pronoun I. So what we look for is that, does he normally stutter? And he doesn't. He's not a stutterer. The pronoun I is something that we in the English language use millions of times. We are as good at using the pronoun I as we could be as good at anything in this life. When someone stutters on the pronoun I, there is an increase in tension and anxiety. And this stutter bothers me here. And it's important. He's talking about his daughter in the context she's still missing. So while the several things are wrong, he gives a narrative or an emotion. He references her beauty, which should be ongoing, and it's not. And he stutters on the pronoun I, and I still wait to hear concern for what Madeleine is going through while this interview is being conducted. And that's going to be a bigger point as we move forward.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The last time someone sees a missing child is always going to be important.
Right.
This may sound a bit strange, but I believe him. I believe that the last time he saw her, he did linger. And he did think about how beautiful she was. I think this is where she was disposed of. And I'll build this theme as we go along.
All right.
The last time you saw her, you thought how lucky you were.
Exactly.
And that bothered me because that's very poor interviewing. That's why we train journalists to not teach someone how to lie. Because the problem with that is he did not think about how lucky he was unless something was wrong. And that's, I can't say that he thought how lucky I was. He only affirms it from what the interviewer said. The interviewer should not have said such a thing. The interviewer is speaking as if the interviewer believes the child is dead. If you have no guilty knowledge of your missing child and you leave the child to go to dinner, you're not going to have that type of nostalgic thoughts. You're just going to dinner and, we'll miss her, we'll be back in shortly and everything will be fine. You don't have those type of thoughts. Having those type of thoughts is an indication of guilty knowledge that Madeleine's gone.
Your world shattered within an hour.
We now have a period of time, and we also have a case of distancing language where he didn't say, my world is shattered. If my daughter was missing, My world is shattered. Not your world. Not someone else's world. Not everyone's world, because everyone experiences this universally. My world is shattered. I'm the father. What's going on with Madeleine right now? No concern. What I'm building towards is this. There's a reason why the McCanns do not show any concern over what Madeleine's experiencing right now. They're intelligent people. They're no dummies here. They're intelligent people. They're not concerned. Parents are forever concerned because even Stephen King said, the terrors that a parent's mind can conjure up in wondering what my children are going through is more horrible than anything he could write. Mm-hmm. Our imaginations double down on us when we try to sleep, worrying about every little slip, every little fall of our children go through. They have shown no concern in the most extreme of circumstances. Why not? And they're going to answer that question for me. So Jerry, as a biological father, is telling us that his world isn't shattered. Your world is. That's distancing language.
At 10 p.m, it was Kate's turn to look in on the kids.
At that point, I expect to hear, I got there and Madeleine was gone. That's, it's not a discovery. It is a traumatic, personal, up-close personal, extreme event that puts hormone levels so high that if they don't recede quickly, there's going to be PTSD. In other words, the hormonal response of finding your child missing is going to be so extreme that in a few moments, you're not going to be able to reason the emotions down, the hormones down. If you're driving your car, and as you're driving, someone cuts you off, and you grab your wheel, and you can feel the flush of hormones. You feel it physically. It's a physiological reaction. You say to yourself, I'm okay, and your hands begin to loosen. The blood goes back towards the blood flow that initially went out to protect you, and the hormones recede in just a few moments, maybe a second or two, even less than a second. If that hormonal response were to stay elevated for more than a few seconds, it is very likely that 30 years from now you're going to wake up screaming because the brain has an imprint on it. If you walked through the door and found your child missing, the hormonal response is so extreme and there's no reasoning it down, that parent will suffer for the rest of the parent's life, even if the child is found safely a week later. 30 years later, the parent will still wake up screaming because the imprint on the brain, the inability for the brain to process the most powerful of human emotions, of mother-child bonding, it can't happen properly. And so we can mitigate it by trying to get them to process it. Journaling is very helpful, but it is so intense. And that's why the vividness is so powerful. And it's physiological. When you're under attack, when something like that happens, your pupils will dilate, you go on high alert, blood will flow to and from certain parts of your body, your legs will become stronger so you can run. The blood goes away from the internal organs so that if you're knifed, you have a better chance of surviving. The hairs, people say the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It's actually true. Piloerection it's called. It is some kind of built-in mechanism to make us look bigger and stronger. Those are the type of reactions that you will have if you find, or I will have, if I find my child being missing. She tells us I had that type of reaction with the conclusion that everything was normal. You can't have it both ways. This is a disconnect that means she's not speaking from experiential memory. She's using certain points of the account, stitching it together in an overall deceptive account.
The bedroom door where the 3 children were sleeping was open much further than we'd left it. I went to close it to about here, and then as I got to here, it suddenly slammed. And then as I opened it, it was then that I just thought, I'll just look at the children. And literally as I went back in, the curtains of the bedroom, which were drawn, were closed. It was like a gust of wind, kind of just blew them open.
This is not a sophisticated liar. this is a silly story where my child is missing and I'm talking about the curtains and blowing and all sorts of emotions. That's where someone who is a police officer, even without terrific training, will say, storytelling. This is storytelling. Well, we call it narrative building, and what she's doing is she's giving the inclusion of emotions, besides many other indicators of problems within the house, including the door. The bedroom door where the three children, not my kids, that's distancing language there, were sleeping, was open much further than I'd left it. That's not what she says. We left it. Does that mean that she and her husband each took a hand and moved the door to a certain level together? Because that's what she wants me to believe. She's lying. This is deception. The fact that she's using door for deception is because she's building a narrative about a kidnapping. The need to build a narrative about kidnapping says the child wasn't kidnapped. That plainly. And literally, as I went back in, the curtains of the bedroom, which were drawn, were closed. It was like a gust of wind blew upon them. She's asking you to enter into an emotional, fictitious account. This is the writing of fiction. This is something that even Statement Analysis 101 would be able to grab on. So I conclude here, deception indicated from this alone.
And you mentioned here again, doors and windows are often found within language of sexual abuse.
Yeah, I'm concerned.
Right.
I'm concerned. This is not a normal family. There are verbal indicators, and it doesn't necessarily mean that Madeleine was a victim of sexual abuse. What it could be is in the language of Kate that she was sexually abused while she was growing up. This would leave her vulnerable for things such as neglect. And if you take that to the next step, someone that has been sexually abused in childhood who is now vulnerable to neglecting her own children, possibly even failure to protect, if someone else, like her husband, was involved in sexual abuse, we would find the need to persuade us, I'm a great mom. We were cuddling. Okay? The reason I indicated deception with that statement about cuddling is because whenever someone says, we call it the I love you factor. I kissed my kids, told them I loved them, and went to bed. Everyone kisses their kids and says, I love you, go to bed. When you see that in a criminal statement, they're telling you something is really wrong between me and the kids. So her need to persuade about the cuddling, if you consider it carefully, you must be open to the fact that she may have been holding a lifeless body and has a need to persuade, no, this was cuddling.
Okay.
This answer, by the way, was one of the most important answers because here we were able to look at the larger measurement of the statement of what happened as she gets into it. And this is a very lengthy introduction. She's not getting to the point of telling us that Madeleine is missing and what must she be going through. She is narrative building of even if we just measured it with the scientific measurement of our formula of 25% introduction, 50% content, 25% afterwards, she is heavily delaying getting to the point and giving lots of unnecessary details. Where do we have more detail? On what Madeleine is going through or on the windows?
And the curtains, which had been closed, just swung open into the room and revealed that the shutter was all the way up and the window being pushed right across. And then I just knew she'd been taken.
Right. She goes to a conclusion of the matter and she goes into present tense language. This is an intelligent woman. She knows how to use verb tenses. When someone is committed to something that happened, I came to the building, not I come to the building. Well, here we have a continued description about the curtains, which is concerning to me, just swung open into the room and reveal that the shutter was all the way up. So if we want to believe what she's going to say is that the reason that she knows that someone has been taken her is because she walked into the room and the room just magically opened itself up and said, look at the evidence. She's lying.
Okay.
This tells us she's lying.
Okay.
This tells us Madeleine was not kidnapped.
Okay.
Kate says after a quick, frantic search of the apartment, she ran back towards Jerry, who was still with their friends at the table by the pool.
I can't remember exactly where the table was. It's kind of in this bit. So it would be about round here. And I was kind of sitting in this bit. Yeah, I mean, Kate was clearly distraught, and I jumped up, but it was kind of disbelief. She can't be gone. She can't possibly. How could she be gone? And I was saying that to Kate as we were both running.
Deception indicated, and here's why. First of all, we have him making an assertion. I know where the table was. I know exactly where the table was. So he's giving us an indication, I am on high alert, the same what she had done before. And then, with this precise language, he immediately moves away from it. It was kinda, he now qualifies it, this bit, so it would be about around here. And I was kinda sitting in this bit. So going from this exact, this is a form of self-censoring. He is stopping himself from going to this precise way he has a need to conceal. He then describes his wife's emotion. Kate was clearly distraught. Now consider this. If your child is missing, you're going to be distraught. Telling us that she's distraught is narrative. It's not necessary to say. I didn't think that she stopped to smoke a cigarette and to look at how beautiful the stars were in the sky. Of course she'd be distraught. Telling us that she was distraught is unnecessary, therefore it's very important. But he now looks to persuade me. Not only was she distraught, but she was clearly distraught. In other words, her affect of being distraught was beyond any debate. So I want you to know that when my child was missing, my wife was really, really, really upset. That's goofy. And that's what this is. It's a need to persuade. That sounds, to the average listener, that sounds goofy. And I jumped up. You know, we did not think that you stopped for a cigarette. We did not think you said, okay, let me have dessert first. This is also unnecessary language. And then he says, kind of disbelief. I believe him. Because he knows it's not true. He knows what he's doing is narrative telling. And so the first thing he's going to say is, where is she? We must find her. No, she can't be gone. She can't. She can't possibly be. How can she be gone? This is an important part for your viewing audience to understand. Guilty people will ask questions. They are looking to see what answers are out there. They're looking for responses from even the interviewer, from police, from the audience. They're floating their alibis to see, will you agree? The first thing that anyone would say if your child was missing is, where is she? Not how can this happen? No, that this can't be happening. Now, we don't even reach denial stage yet. As a father or mother, the first thing we do is, no, I'm going to find her. She wandered out. The door was open. She's out here, let's get her. They know that she didn't wander out. So he artificially not only imputes his emotions into this part of the statement, he artificially inflates both of their emotions. The fact that he says that he had to do something immediately, and I jumped up, it itself is unnecessary. Of course, any father is going to jump up. He has a need to persuade us. He might, at this point, be reliving the emotions, the motions that he went through in this. So he gives us, he wants us to think that he's in denial. She can't possibly be what? He stopped himself. Be dead? How can she be gone is a question. And I said that to Kate, no. And I was saying that to Kate as we were both running. Now this is also interesting, and it may be a little bit overkill, but this is what analysts do. We would take this short answer and analyze it for hours. And just one small point here. And I was saying that to Kate as we were running. Nope. As I was saying that to Kate as we were both running. He has a need to persuade that both were in earnest. Both were upset. Both were in emergency mode. because they weren't. Those that are in emergency mode don't even need to tell us they're in emergency mode, but they certainly don't need to persuade us. His need to persuade that they were in emergency mode tells us this was not unexpected, this was not an emergency. Richard, he's lying.
Okay.
Police were called within 15 minutes, but they didn't arrive for nearly an hour. It took them another 2 hours before they bothered to seal off Madeleine's bedroom. British investigators later called it the worst preserved crime scene they'd ever encountered. Roadblocks and checks weren't put on Portugal's borders for a full 12 hours. And within days, hundreds of guests, potential witnesses and suspects had checked out and left without ever having been interviewed.
Now, I can't defend what the police did or didn't do. I don't know it. I didn't work with them. I have no association with them. But I do ask your viewing audience to consider that it is very possible that the initial investigators didn't believe they needed to do any of those things.
Yeah.
I'd like you to consider this. I know exactly where that table was, and then he stumbles over to exactly where the table was. Why would he give such an unnecessary detail? Why would we care where the table was located? In resisting interrogations, Navy SEALs use a tactic. If an enemy takes a Navy SEAL, the Navy SEAL is taught to resist the interrogation by giving enough truthful details of something irrelevant to satisfy the interrogators. And so a Navy SEAL is captured, and he talks about how he dives and cleans the ship. And he gives such details that the interrogators think, this idiot is someone's job is just to clean a ship, and he's going on and on about every detail of how he does it and how long he's underwater, what tools he uses. Nothing to find here. Jerry shows a stronger or a more efficient level of sophistication and deception in this manner. This is, in fact, what you had mentioned earlier in your question. This is a form of diversion. He is safely going in to describe a table, because that's a safe thing to say. We call this leakage. He knows what happens, or I'll say it this way. The brain knows what happened. He now has to go into the brain and talk about what happened but not give it away. It's really difficult because he might choose some of the wrong words by accident. So he focuses on a table and then he stumbles on it because it's such a ridiculous point. He's using a diversion tactic because it's necessary. So what we do is we say, well, here's a diversion tactic. Why would the dad of a missing little girl need to make such effort to divert attention away from what happened?
The night seemed so long. Every second was excruciating, and it was dark, and he just wanted to be light and everybody searching, and Madeleine found.
Okay, this particular statement itself is very concerning. First of all, we'd ask the question, for whom was this night so long and so excruciating for? For Kate. Or, if we want to listen to her words, it was not even for Kate, it was for you. Listen to what she says. Believe what she says. The night seemed so long, every second was excruciating, and it was dark, and you just want there to be light. Not she, not her as a mother. But by the way, was it excruciating for Madeleine to be taken? She shows concern for you or herself, and nothing for the child. A parental instinct is so powerful that we've used it in judicial courts since time out of mind. Going back to the Solomonic courts of your Bible lessons, where two women gave birth to children, and one woman rolled over and suffocated the child. And they each claimed custody of the living child. Neither wanted custody of the dead child. And it went all the way to Solomon's court, and people who know the story said Solomon said, bring me a sword, cut the living child in half, and give them each half their baby. Solomon had no intention of committing murder. What Solomon had done was repeated both women's arguments. The woman who actually gave birth to the child said, let her the liar, have the child, let my child live. And everyone was able to see that's really the mother. He was exploiting maternal instinct. Prior to that, he simply repeated their arguments. And if we listen very carefully, especially as it comes out in Hebrew, it's very simple. This mother says, the dead child is hers, the living child is mine. She mentioned the dead child first. That's what people do. They mention their own first. But this mother says, no, the living child is mine, the dead child is hers. She mentioned the living child first because that's her child. When no one understood that, when no one was listening to the order of which someone spoke, then Solomon called for the sword and said, cut the baby in half and give them each half, without any intention of murder. The maternal instinct came forward, everyone knew. They would have known before the sword was taken if they just listened to each mother. So I ask you to listen to this mother, and listen to her carefully. The night seemed so long. For whom? Every second was excruciating. For whom? It was dark, and you just want there to be light. Okay, let's find out what you want. Let's look at the order. You want there to be light, you want everybody searching, and you want Madeleine found. Her priority is light for you, everybody searching, and Madeleine found. Madeleine is the last thing in her priority. As a matter of fact, this statement shows that someone was living in excruciating pain, someone was living in excruciating length of time, impatience. But here is where we expect her to show what Madeleine is going through. Where is her teddy bear? Where is her favorite blanket? Where is her favorite toy? Not a single word of concern. Now, why would she give last in her priority Madeleine being found? I ask your audience to consider, she doesn't want Madeleine found. Any parent, innocent parent, would want that first and foremost. She instead turns to lights, and that would be more further insight psychologically into their own thinking. But her order tells us that the last in her priority is having Madeleine found. We also see that the emotion that's used is narrative, but it's also focused towards her. However, in the pronoun you, even that she doesn't take ownership of. I think it was an excruciating night, and I think that her concern for herself is genuine because this is what I'm building towards. Mm-hmm. There's no concern for Madeleine by a biological mother and by a biological father because Madeleine is dead. Madeleine is beyond concern. Madeleine is beyond help. There's no more fretting or worrying for Madeleine, and that's what's in this statement. Mm-hmm. Is Madeleine crying? Does she have her favorite teddy bear? Is she getting her meds? Is she calling out for me, the mother? Is Madeleine in excruciating pain? What must Madeleine be experiencing in the hands of strangers? These are all things that were not in their language.
Yeah.
And this is consistent. This is not just one interview. These people have always been focused upon themselves. They have always given indication that Madeleine will not be found alive, if found at all, and that Madeleine being found is not something they want to happen. Mm-hmm. Their concern is always for themselves because Madeleine doesn't need concern any longer. The past tense reference is one thing that indicates death, but this is the most powerful part of the analysis, is that they're telling us Madeleine is dead. Now I know that people wondered if there was a kidnapping, if they were sold into sex rings, child sex rings, and these things do exist. That's not what's in the parents' language. So I can only say what's in that language. And I'm letting them guide me. I'm letting them dictate to me my opinion by the words that they're choosing. And they're actually going to give us more detail.